Okay, I got a lot of flack a couple of days ago. I sent out a tweet, and that tweet said I think it was something along the lines of, "You all know me as a rock and roll fan, but I also like a couple of artists from a couple of different genres, and one of them is Eminem." And I said, unpopular opinion, here it comes: Recovery and Relapse, more so Relapse, was one of Eminem's best albums and one of my favorites. His last true magnum opus. Apparently, a lot of people don't like his magnum opus. Apparently, a lot of people don't like Relapse. That's not a surprise to me. I think I'm in the minority. I mean, I think it's gotten much more credit over years as a really good album, but I enjoy a lot of things that a lot of people don't enjoy. A lot of my audience probably doesn't like a lot of rock, yet I am so far down the rock rabbit hole, you might as well consider me fucking Rapunzel, or whatever that princess is. You're good. You're good. You're perfectly fine. You're perfectly fine, goddammit. Screw off. Alright, so obviously I like a lot of things that a lot of people don't like. I liked 3 a.m. You must be insane if you like 3 a.m., right? It's about an individual slaughtering a bunch of people on a drunken and alcohol-fueled rampage through a suicidal manslaughter hunt, you know? That actually speaks a lot to who I am as a person. Anyway, so I had one friend take a screenshot of that, send it to me on Twitter, and go, "You buggin'." Just straight up, "You buggin'." I was like, I guess I am. So I asked the question, why? So, I liked Relapse. I enjoyed a lot about Relapse. Bagpipes from Baghdad. I enjoyed. I think it was Mom or something like that. I enjoyed. Beautiful, loved. 3 a.m., starved for. Let's see. We Made You, nice little callback to his earlier days. Deja Vu was probably the most underrated song on that entire album. I enjoyed it so much. It was a nice little telling tale. I also like Recovery. I listened to Recovery maybe 6 times in a row last Friday. No reason whatsoever. Just wanted to. And I liked it all. I guess it was very mainstream or more popish than his original works or other works, which I can understand, but then again, I've always liked and enjoyed Eminem's pace and flow in his delivery in his songs. More so his later shit. Like, I enjoy Spacebound, I enjoy Cold Wind Blows, Talking to Myself, I enjoyed On Fire, Almost Famous. I enjoyed all of that shit from Recovery. And I think Recovery was a lot harsher of an album than Eminem had put out beforehand. Like, Infinite was, I mean, as much of a commercial failure as people describe it, it had some good shit on there. The Slim Shady LP was harsh. Marshall Mathers LP, the original one, was harsh. Eminem Show, lighter. You know, I think it was lighter than what you would see if you kind of looked below the surface. And then, you know, you followed that up with, I think, it wasn't Encore, no, it was, fuck, why am I forgetting? God damn it. Jesus Christ. Alright, it'll come to me. And then we moved on to Encore, and then we moved on to Relapse. And then we moved on to Recovery. Relapse, I can understand that he overdid the accent, but then again, I thought it was a nice little touch compared to his earlier stuff. And with Recovery, it was something harsher. It was something heavier than he had put out originally, or that he had put out before. And obviously, we now have Kamikaze, we've had Revival, and we've had the Marshall Mathers LP2 since. But I look at Recovery as something harsher and as something heavier than he had written beforehand, and is probably, if you look at it from all cylinders, from on the surface, above the surface, below the surface, through his lyrics, through the tone, through the pacing of his songs, through his flow. I think of it as the heaviest album he's put out so far. That doesn't mean good or bad, but I enjoyed it. It was very heavy, it was very raw, more raw than I think a lot of his works were. There were a lot of times where I thought in his works he just said things to anger people. You know, he had a reason for saying what he had said or why he had said what he had said. With Recovery, I think it was just a case of he wanted it to be there. He wanted it to be barren. You know, he didn't enjoy Relapse. He thought it was meh. He thought it was something that, you know, it was a harsher point. I think one of the songs he had phrased it as, Encore I was on drugs, Relapse I was flushing them out. But if Relapse is him flushing out the drugs, then my God, I would rather have him constantly flush out the drugs than be on drugs or be talking about the time he was on drugs. I would rather him getting them out of his system if it meant that he would make more shit like Relapse. I enjoyed Relapse because it was something that, while Recovery was heavier and harsher than what he had written beforehand, Relapse was a divide from what he had put out beforehand. Eminem's show, Encore, and the goddamn album that I keep fucking forgetting. I might look it up, but Encore and the Eminem show was something I think a lot more characterized. I think it was based off of a lot of things, like the Steve Berman character, obviously the Slim Shady persona, like Stan. Obviously, he had heavy shit from there. You know, he had heavier, deeper songs, even on that, you know, cartoonish. I like calling it a cartoonish vibe, because you had things like The Real Slim Shady, My Name Is, so on and so forth, but you had heavier and deeper things on there, like Mockingbird, like Toy Soldiers. You had brooding, like heavy, dark shit like Kim, and obviously you had your anthems from them, like Till I Collapse. You had Lose Yourself, but there was never an entire album in which I saw, like Recovery, I saw something heavier and more weighted, and like Relapse, that I saw something more distinctly apart from what he had released prior. I enjoyed them because it was different, and because it gave us a different side of Slim Shady, and it gave us a different side of Marshall Mathers, and it gave us a completely new look into his writing process. I think with Relapse, he was at his peak with writing. Not necessarily his delivery or flow, but with his writing. He was able to pull lines out in places from his ass that would never be reached by the depths of mankind. And with Recovery, with Relapse, you were able to see such a bleeding onto the paper of words and of structure to song layouts. With Recovery, you got to see a little bit of a look into that structure. He was the Slim Shady that we had known. He was the Eminem that we had been used to, but it was something a little bit more stripped down from the character department of Eminem, or the cartoon department of Eminem. It was something more down to earth, which I get a lot of people don't like from Eminem, because it's not Eminem at that point in time. It's not what he's used to, or not what everybody's used to, or what he's known for. But it was something new, and it was something different, and I enjoyed it a lot. And granted, there are going to be a lot of people that will look at this and go, well, Recovery and Relapse were pretty much the same as what he had written before, or what he has written since. I have a different outlook on that. I don't agree with that. I think Relapse was, well, yes, character based in some aspects. It was harsher and darker and more raw and gritty, but at the same time, more profoundly put together in terms of structure and layout of song and of the writing, or of songwriting. That's what I was looking for. Than a lot of his earlier work had been. And then his follow-up album to that, Recovery, was something that was more heavy and more weighted down than what he had released beforehand and what he had been releasing years beforehand. And at the same time, you were able to see a little bit more to the structure of his songs and exactly how he would put them together. You could take a little bit of a line and see at what point in time he put in the song, writing that song, he put that in there. I think there was one line that he actually made reference to it. It was, because if you have a keen eye for it, you kind of understand when you're looking at somebody and seeing the complete structure and layout of the song. So that doesn't even need to tell you. He had one line of, I just thought of another line that might go here. Not Psycho, save it. Plus you got to rewrite those lines that you set up on Michael's hair or something like that. But he made reference to the fact that, you know, he could just put lines in wherever the fuck he feels like, and you can see that in the songs. And he understood that, made reference to it in the goddamn song, because he's fucking Eminem, of course he would. I just enjoyed that, and I get that a lot of people like specific albums or specific works from different bands and artists for the overall aspect, for everything on the surface, but if you look deeper and you appreciate Relapse and Recovery for what they were, it's different from just an Eminem album. It was an Eminem album that gave you a little bit of an insight into the writing process and a little bit of a different taste and a little bit of a different flavor than you had gotten beforehand and what you were used to from Eminem. So it was different. It was new, but at the same time, it wasn't so new that you would say it's not Eminem. It's something different. It's something completely devoid of Eminem-ness. You get the point. Either way, I enjoyed Relapse and I enjoyed Recovery. Give me as much flack on it as you possibly can, but I enjoy music. And I enjoy the art of music and the art that people involved in music that are passionate about music put into their music. And Eminem put a lot into Relapse, and Eminem put a lot into Recovery, even if he didn't know it or understand it at the time. But it was something new, and it was something heavier, and it was something different. I've never been as big of a fan of cartoon Eminem, like the earlier works, even with their heavier shit, I'll say that much. I was never as much of a fan of that cartoonish side as much as I was the more raw and real and heavy side of Eminem that you saw. So that is my stance on that. Again, give me as much flack as you can, but try to look back at Relapse, try to look back at Recovery, and think of it more than just an album. Listen to it more than just his words, or more than just the beat or the tempo behind his song, or the flow that he goes into with this song. Look deeper into everything. Look at the song structure. Look at song structure. Look at the wording. Look at what he put into. Look at whether he put this line in verse 1 after he had already finished verse 2, or after he had already finished the hook. Look at that kind of stuff, and you'll appreciate it a lot more. And also look back at his earlier works and see how different they are. But how much you can appreciate that, because not only does it show the versatility of a guy or a writer like Marshall Mathers or Eminem, obviously you also see a different side that is more willing and accepting of a more in-depth look at him as a person and as a writer. So, I've gotten through that rant. Party Complex, back in 120.